As part of our ongoing commitment to provide as much in-person instruction for as many students as often as possible in a safe school environment, I am pleased to announce that in collaboration with the Dutchess County Department of Behavioral and Community Health, we are adopting new COVID testing quarantine protocols for the district effective today, November 9th, 2021. We would like to thank and commend the Dutchess County Department for Behavioral and Community Health for supporting this endeavor in the following areas: test to stay, test out of quarantine, and COVID-19 testing to permit the return to school after symptoms. I'd like to take an opportunity to explain these in more detail. The test to stay is for students identified as close and proximate contacts to a COVID positive individual. They will have the ability to test to stay in school. Note that the test to stay strategy only applies to the school day, and all other exclusions outside of the school day continue to be in effect, such as extracurricular, after-school activities, and weekend events. Identified students will have the option to test with either a NAT PCR and or antigen rapid test on each school day for 7 days after exposure. As long as the student tests negative, they will be able to maintain their in-person school attendance. However, if the student begins to show signs and symptoms of COVID, they will be excluded from school per current Department of Health guidance. Next, test out of quarantine, the alternative to test to stay. For students identified as a close and proximate contact to a COVID positive individual, they'll have another option to increase in-person instruction and test out of quarantine and return to school after completing a minimum of 7 days of quarantine, symptom-free. If the student remains symptom-free during the first 5 days of the quarantine, the student may elect to take a NAT PCR or antigen test. If by day 7 of quarantine the COVID test comes back negative, the student may return to school on what would have been the student's 8th day of the mandatory quarantine period, so long as they remain symptom-free. In this scenario, the student must remain in quarantine for at least 7 days and be symptom-free for the duration of 7 days. However, if the student begins to show signs and symptoms of COVID and or test positive, they will be excluded from school per current Dutchess County Department of Health guidance. And lastly, COVID-19 testing to permit return to school after symptoms. For students evidencing new and or worsening signs and symptoms consistent with COVID, they can test and return to school or complete the 10-day quarantine period. Students who are fully vaccinated or who were diagnosed with a lab-confirmed test for COVID can return to school following a negative antigen rapid test. For students who are not vaccinated and have not been diagnosed with COVID previously, they can return to school with a negative NAT PCR test result, as an antigen rapid test will not suffice. The district, in collaboration with a county-approved provider, will make available as a convenience to our families daily on-site testing within the district for all of our students who are participating in a mandatory quarantine period due to close contact COVID exposure. We believe that this will help reduce the burden on our families who are attempting to find antigen tests elsewhere in our community. These new protocols are optional for families to participate. We are hopeful that these procedures in regards to COVID continue to allow for maximum in-person instruction opportunities for our students. Again, I thank you for all of your patience and understanding as well as your continued support of our students and our district. Thank you.